I done tussle with a whale. I done handcuff lightning, throw thunder in jail. That's bad. I know you got him picked, but the man's in trouble. I'm gonna show you how great I am.
I'm the most brutal and vicious and most ruthless champion there's ever been. There's no one can stop me.
I don't want that person to come out because if he comes out, hell is coming with him.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Busted Lip Podcast. My name is Mark Pavlich, away in the rock, the tall, cool one, TJ Harstein, and our special guest today, everybody. You know him as arguably the greatest Cutman in the history of Cutman, actor, publisher, you name it, man. He's done it all. Everybody, welcome to the show, Jacob Stitch Duran.
Hey, what's going on, Mark? TJ, what's going on, man? I like the stash, bro.
I got the oil in it and everything. You know, we're keeping it shiny. We're doing our
There we
best.
go. I love it. Yeah, but thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank you for coming, Stitch. And you know what? I gotta get into it right away with you. With there's something I've always been curious of because I've watched for years. I've watched you for years, both MMA and boxing, and I've always been curious. How does one? You know, I know you were in the fight business before in different ways, but how does one start to become a Cutman? Like, how does that really come about, and what's the process look like for that? Because that's such a specialized thing.
Yeah, you know, my daughter asked me the other day. I went to go see Josh Barnett in his Bloodsport promotion, right? And she said, "Dad, you know, how come none of us ever took up what you did?" I said, "Because you didn't have the passion that I had.
That's right.
You know, you got to spend hours and days and weeks and months and years, you know, in the gym. That's why everybody wants to be a Cutman now. And that's what I tell them. You know, you got to spend all this time in the gym and sacrifice yourself and, you know, understand the game physically, psychologically. And as you go to, you know, learning to be a Cutman, even a trainer, you start wrapping hands, but you do it at the gym at your own expense. And, you know, I tell people every time you wrap a hand, it's like a business card. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you start working corners. And, you know, from there, you understand cuts and swelling and you grow from there. And, you know, and with all that said, about 2 months ago, I put a video together because they want me to do seminars all the time. And I can't because I got a crazy schedule, right? But it's $50. And it shows you everything I know. It's because, you know, and when I was learning to be a Cutman years ago, I asked this one guy that he did a good job. And can you tell me what you did? He says, "Fuck you." Because I'm thinking this to my grave and you got to learn like me, right?
Yeah.
And I always remembered him and I said, I'm never going to be like that piece of shit.
Yeah.
So the video's $50. It's at stitchduran.com. And the kid just, you know, you could rent it for 10 at one spot for, let's say, wrapping hands or working cuts. And you only rent it for $10. But it's not to make money. It's to make it open to these guys that ask those type of questions.
We'll make sure we have your website on all our stuff for people to purchase that, because I had the luxury one time, this is 100 years ago, and you'll remember this. I know you will. I used to own the MFC in Canada for 20 years. It was the biggest show in Canada for MMA, but I had a side hustle where I managed and trained Jason McDonald from Canada.
Yes.
And one time he says, "Mark, you got to get Stitch to do my hands, you know, like I always get other guys, but it's like, you know, it's like royalty to do, you know, get Stitch." So I told the guy backstage, I go, "Can you just get a Stitch, please?" And I remember I was watching you tape and people were like wondering why I was just staring at the way you were doing it. And I looked at you and I said, "You know what you are, man? You're the Mexican Picasso." Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know if you remember that. And you said, "Shit, no one's ever called me the Mexican Picasso before." But I said, "You are seriously." And what I said to Jason McDonald was, I said, "When you take that tape off, you should cut it down the palm so that you can put it back together and keep it, because there's things that you can do that are just so, like, there's people that know how to do things, but this was different. Like, I've seen millions of people tape hands. I've seen millions of people do it, but not like this. This was something different. And the passion that you showed for the fighters when you were doing it was something that I recognized. And I was around the time when the thing happened with you in the UFC, and I thought it was deplorable on all levels, like to the highest degree. And there's nothing for me to talk bad about anybody, but it literally was like, I was just like, you were like the most loved person backstage. You and Bert. You and Bert
Yep.
were the two
Yep.
most loved people backstage. And I remember having this discussion with someone one day. They were like, maybe it was Rogan even, and he was like, yeah, they really are like, they're the two most loved guys in the world. And we've had Bert on this show before too, as well.
Right.
So it was like, we have to have Stitch on the show. But if there was two people, and then when you were both not there one day, it was never the same. It was just different. Like, it wasn't like you really cared. And maybe you didn't, but you tell me, because it seemed like you really did care.
Yeah, 100%, Mark.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right,
Yeah.
and you're right. I am the Mexican Picasso. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
And I do
for real,
remember
man.
that 'cause
For
it don't
real.
happen. But the thing with it, and now that I'm working with Top Rank as their house cut man, like what the UFC used to do, right? All these young guys, it's they feel honored, But
Yes.
like I say, is I treat everyone like they're a world champ, because the young ones need to understand how important it is to have a cut man, even the veterans. But I mean, and talking to him psychologically at that moment is the key. Frank Mir says, says, when I see Stitch walking into the dressing room, he says, my stomach drops because I know it's time to fight.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
And that's step one.
Yeah.
Jason McDonald, of course.
Yeah.
That was a big honor for me too. And those are memories, and the only we could take with us are memories. And,
I think, and that's what I think, Stitch. I think people forgot about certain things. Like when I was in this sport, I knew how to do everything, and it was my. I was kind of weird like that. I wanted to know how the ring was set up. And people were like, "Why did you come so early, Mark? You own the show." I'm like, "I don't care. I want to know how everything is done." And I was always studying these things, and it was funny because there was multiple times I was at the UFC, and there was like a problem with the commission, and Dana White was there, and every time there was a problem, he would go, "Mark, come here for a second," because he knew that I knew the answer. Right? It's like I wasn't just a promoter. I was like always looking at how people did stuff, and I was always watching, like when you would tape hands, I was like the weirdo kid looking like I never was a geek in the world until I became watching people that I knew did something so great that I was like, wow. And how many fights I saw you save. Like, that's just something that people don't understand either. Sometimes that watch our podcast, you saved fights. Like, you literally saved fights. And people are just watching at home, not understanding how all this works. And unfortunately, I do understand it to the highest degree. And I was like, wow, you just saved multiple. I can, like, off the top of my head, remember fights that you've saved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, I'd say I've made a lot of money for a lot of guys, man. But
right.
it's not even about that. It's about taking care of them. And I think you were talking about what Bert and I left. Dan Hardy said it best. He goes, "That was the end of the golden era of MMA."
Sure.
And you look at the characters now, and they took the names away from everybody and they gave them numbers. But that's the corporate style. So everything now is based on UFC. But it's funny. My wife and I went to go see Sinners last night because Michael B. Jordan, and I'm in the Creed movies, and I'm walking into the Yard House to go eat. And they, "Hey man, you're from the UFC, huh?" Man, I've been gone 10 years, and people still
say that.
associate me with the UFC.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, you were a face that everybody saw, so often, right? And it became a thing where when you were in somebody's corner, you were sort of a character within it as well. But I'm curious, did you ever feel like, because you've worked with the who's who of MMA, you've worked with the who's who of boxing, the biggest names, the biggest fights and all that sort of stuff. Did you ever feel like there was a little bit of added pressure on yourself, whether it was to save a fight? Because again, as Mark said, there's Cutman can be a difference between a fight going one more round or being stopped. But also just being in that close proximity to when things are happening at such big moments in some of those big championship fights. Did you ever feel like any of that was kind of coming down upon you? And was there a time where maybe you were a little bit more nervous than you expected going into a bout?
Well, the nerves those are kind of gone, but making the right decisions, and I've done them multiple times. Vladimir Klitschko, I had the doctor stop the fight and go to the scorecards. He won and became world champ for 8 years, right? There's been guys, Andre Duran in boxing, I stopped the fight because he was taking long-term damage. And next day, him and his wife called me and thanked me. And, guys in MMA, I've stopped them and protect them and save them for another day. Who was it? So many guys, I think Mike Pyle comes in, he's cut, and he said, "Man, when I see Stitch walking in, I know I'm cut, but I know I'm taken care of." So those are the fine, and still are the fine moments that go through my career, and it blows my mind every day. I'm thinking, "Shit, why me?" But I'm glad that it is me.
Yeah.
What's the worst cut you've ever seen ever?
Man, there's been times, bro.
The worst though. There's got to be one that's the granddaddy of them all.
The ones I didn't work with Badu Jack when he got that big
Oh
old
yeah,
cut
I
and he
remember.
bled
Yeah,
like a
Ooh,
pig,
yeah.
right?
yeah,
But yeah, Marvin Eastman when
Marvin
he took a
Eastman,
knee
yeah.
yeah. I
from
remember.
Vitor Belfort.
That's right.
Yeah.
So he has a big old cut, and Joe
Crazy.
Rogan says it looks like filleted fish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And but
It
now
sure
here's the psychological part that a
yeah,
lot of you guys don't know. Marvin, when I went to Marvin, I
yeah,
had to check on his functions and mental functions.
yeah.
So what I did is I know that they're showing me working on him on the big screens because I could hear all the people ooh and ah.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I said, Marvin, I said, this is the biggest fucking cut I've ever seen in my life. And I said that just to get his
That's
reaction.
oh
Well,
my God.
he started smiling like that.
Yeah.
So I
Oh,
knew that he was okay.
Mhm.
You know,
sure.
that was my way of evaluating him, and outside of the cut, you know, he was fine.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think it's incredible. Yeah, I mean, like watching that stuff happen, and it's happening all so fast, obviously, and going through that. But in a sense, you're sort of like the doctor before the doctor, you know.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
have to make those calls, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. So, but do you ever feel pressured one way or the other to do something? Or, I mean, now it's different, but maybe earlier in your career, did you ever feel like, ooh, I don't know if I should make this call or that, and trying to make things work for a fighter as opposed to the actual situation at hand?
Now, you know, I always looked at safety. Good question, there, TJ. I always look at safety number one, and advantages. I work a lot on numbers,
Mm.
right? And just
Oh,
like Vladimir Klitschko, when I knew he was winning the fight when he got that big old nasty cut,
Yeah.
and that's why I opened up in front of the doctor when she asked,
yeah.
and they stopped and went to the scorecards. He won. So I was basing it on numbers
Right.
and high probabilities. But yeah, of course, you know, I look at everything and make a decision as it goes. Andre Durrell, when I was saying when I stopped the fight, he was taking what I consider long-term damage
Yeah. Oh yeah.
from Jose Esqueregi.
Yeah.
And I sat down and I said, look, man, do you want to continue? Kind of little no. I said, "Oh, stop the fight in the corner. No, he's okay. He's okay. And I said, nope. Once he told me no, he's done. The next day at 8 in the morning, him and his wife called me.
Wow.
Thank you, Stitch. You know, I want to thank
Wow.
you. I just had nothing with me. But the cap to that is, I think about 3-4 months ago with Berlanga fought here in Vegas, I saw Andre Durrell's been 2-3 years.
Yeah.
Man, Stitch gives me a hug, man.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you, man. Because of you, I'm like this. Thank you.
Yes.
You
Wow.
know,
Especially
Yeah.
with CTE now coming around now,
big time.
and all these other things that don't go away. There's no cure for them, and that is the difference now. And
Yeah.
you do, and you know what's funny? You don't see it. You see it in MMA now because you didn't see it at the beginning of MMA because no one knew what the word punch drunk meant in MMA.
Yes. Yes.
And then all of a sudden, as time went on, we're starting to see it now. We didn't see it like right around your era when you left. You started to just see creeping of the guys that started in MMA, and now you can really see it. You can see guys that are and females, excuse me,
Mhm.
that are just a little off center. You know what I mean? So
100%. And
yeah,
you're 100% right. And you know, about, oh shit, it's been 23, 24 years ago. Before Mike Tyson got his tattoos, I put a documentary together called Boxer's Nightmare. And it dealt with all the stuff the fighters were going
Wow.
through then, right? And dementia pugilistica was one of them. Well, I hadn't done nothing because I was nobody. You know, I just kind of put it in the shelf after about 20 years. And the young kid that helped me, John Barnhouse, passed away about a year and a half ago. I pulled this film out to look at it, and I'm thinking, wow, man, everybody I have here are all Hall of Famers. I got
Crazy.
Mike Tyson before he got his
Crazy.
tattoos, Eddie Mustafa, Fernando Vargas, Mills Lane, Joe Cortez, Richard Steele,
Wow.
all
Wow.
these legends. And they talked about the issues that are now affecting MMA.
Yeah.
And so, as a tribute to John, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get update interviews with current fighters, current MMA people,
Yeah.
and find out how come 25 years ago these legends had an answer. How come nothing's ever been done?
Yeah.
So
It's so
gonna,
true though, Stitch.
100%, bro. I've seen it.
It's
Hey,
so
listen,
true.
I've
So
been
true.
gone, Mark. I've been gone for MMA 10 years.
Yeah.
I come back, and some of these guys that I've worked with, I see the slur of speech, and
Yep.
Yep.
you know, Livingstone Bramble, one of my best fighters, friends, passed away 2 weeks ago, and he didn't even recognize me the last time I went to visit him, and
Jesus, man.
I cried, and
Of
I told his
course.
son, I never want to see him again. I don't want to. I want to remember him the way we
Yeah, of
were,
course.
Yeah.
not the way he was.
Yeah.
You know, so it was horrible.
Yeah.
I believe that's going to be a pandemic in MMA very soon. We already know in boxing it exists, but we're going to see it in MMA. And then I know for sure that the UFC will try to find some way not for things like that to come out. You know what I mean? Because that just puts more regulations on a sport. And sometimes they're needed. But we know people even here in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, where I'm from. TJ's out in Vancouver area, and Tim Hague, who fought in the UFC, he also passed away in the boxing ring. But he was knocked out prior to that multiple times in training sessions, and there's no way to document that. And then all of a sudden he gets in the ring, and then he gets hit too hard, and then brain bleed, and he dies. So these are but that's what people don't understand, like the safety of the sport. And I do blame the commissions too. And I know that, people don't want to talk about that, but if you're going to be a commission, be a commission. Not there's no gray area. This is the rules, and that's it. There's no like kind of rules, or we're going to let you get away with this and not this and all this kind of stuff. And it's funny because my father was a referee in the NHL for 30 years, and he's in the Hockey Hall of Fame, my father, and he's still alive at 91 years old. And I think I get that from him, playing by the rules. And I've always had to play by the rules, and I always have, and I'm okay with that. But I always see these commissions now, they're just a little bit, they like, oh, we'll let that go, we won't let this go. We'll let this go, but we won't let that go. And you can't be like that as a commission. You have to be dead on, you have to be direct, and I don't want to be friends with anybody. So I'm not going to be disgruntled with people, but you have to be straight. This is what the rules are. This is how it is. And if it's not like that, the fight's not on.
Yeah, and I go through that all the time, and education is what I always want to bring forward, because, in all fairness, I know my shit, and I'm not going to say it unless I know I have proof. But I put a lot of these inspectors in check, and they're asking me questions, why this and why that. I'll ask them questions, a basic question. I'll ask them, and I'll tell these young fighters, I said, look, if you're looking for a cut man, number one, if you put the swab in his mouth and his ear, get another guard. That's old school.
Yeah,
but ask him what the adrenaline chloride 1000 does, the medication. That's right. The one that we put in the swab and put on the cut. I'll ask him that. Okay, let me ask you guys, TJ, do you know, and you're not supposed to know, but do you know what that medication does?
I would imagine it restricts blood flow to the area or pushes it away. That's my guess.
Okay, all right. Mark, go ahead.
I think it clogs it.
All right. Well, if the cut man says that it clots it, get another cut man, because it's wrong. TJ, you're about the closest. The adrenaline chloride 1000 that we use is by prescription only, but it's a vessel constrictor. Okay. So when you see me work on a cut, I'll squeeze it to kind of drain the little blood out of the veins, and I'll put the swab and it absorbs into the veins and they'll close them. So that's the mechanical of that. So I always try to teach these young kids, ask them these questions, because if they don't have the right answer, they're not cut men. But getting back to the commissions, a lot of them are appointed by the states or the governors, and
that's right.
And they really don't understand the game,
the sport,
combat sports,
for sure.
And I've done seminars for some of these commissions, and I've answered questions and try to get them on the right track. And then another thing is, we as cut men and we as coaches, none of us have to be certified to be called pros. You're talking about your dad being in hockey; he was certified.
Of course,
everybody there. None of us have to be certified.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You think that would get cleaned up at some point, because you're dealing with cuts. You're dealing with something. I mean,
even coaches, bro. Even coaches.
Yeah,
you're right.
Even coaches.
But Stitch, what happened with that? Why doesn't the same thing happen? Like John McCarthy, I remember at one point he started certifying referees.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm sure, but he was the referee for the UFC. Hypothetically, kind of that's what he was for the commission, but technically for the UFC as well. But he started putting on the course for referees and certifying referees, and it was one thing I do give John credit for is it was a very difficult course to graduate from. Yeah. But why wouldn't there be something like you, because you're at the highest of the food chain, where you would have to get certified by you to become a cut man and to be able to part of commissions? You should be compensated for your knowledge, which means you should never be embarrassed of that. You should never be shy of even talking about that. You should be compensated as, okay, guys, if you're going to be in the MMA world and you're going to work under the California Commission, the New York Commission, anyone in Canada, you have to get certified by Stitch. He's going to run 4 courses a year. It's going to cost X amount of dollars, and you're going to have to pay him for his knowledge. And then if you don't graduate, you got to come back and get it right, because he's not just going to let you go in and do it.
Yeah, it sounds a lot easier than said than done, as they say, right? Because and I do seminars whenever I can. I did one in Mexico City. There's like 120 people that showed up, and 40 on Zoom. So the ones I have are big. I did one in Toronto. And but the thing is you come to my class and you spend 4 hours there, and I'm not going to certify you because you're not. It's going to
Yeah.
take more than 4 hours
That's right.
Yeah.
for you to go and do what you've
That's
got to
right.
do,
That
right?
course
So
wouldn't be enough.
that's what.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why you got to say you got to. There's a lot more to it than that, and being in the trenches is number one.
Yeah.
And taking the steps and by holding the bucket, and you got to go through the process and learn cuts, and I get doctors and EMTs and nurses that ask me this question all the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you got to be in the trenches, bro. It's just we got 50 seconds.
Yeah.
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 That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big difference, and to have the right tools and equipment, and that's why I put this video out. Because I can't do all these seminars. I would love to, but the same token, and if for $50, you look at it and you study it and you study it. As a matter of fact, Hasim Rockman's son, Hasim Rockman. I'll tell you a story.
Yeah.
I went to the fights about a month and a half ago, and we're waiting for our car at valet, and he introduces himself to me and tells me he wants to learn how to wrap this and that, wrap hands. And so I told him about the video. I saw him a week later. He said, Stitch, I've wrapped 15 hands. I'm used to every time I go, I'll look at the video and I'll study it, and I'll go back and I'll practice this. Everything that he said is what these guys need to do, is to study it,
And
to
practice.
to
Yeah.
practice,
Yeah.
to practice, to practice, to practice. I used to practice my own hands. I'd wrap my own hands
Wow.
and get back. And matter of fact, there's a little scar right here. I'm at home and I'm taking it off, and just like you say, you cut at the wrist area, and I twisted my skin, and it took a spot about that big away.
Jesus.
So I kind of but listen, I freaked out a little bit, but then I kept my composure. I went to the refrigerator, got my adrenaline chloride 1000, applied it on my cut. So
There you go.
it's a little trophy from God, bro.
Yeah. There you go. Handy having that stuff at home, right?
Yeah.
All right. That's I switch gears a little bit, I guess, but I know you were in the corner for Tyson for the Tyson Big Jake Paul fight.
Yeah.
And I'm so curious with you being so close to that in that moment, because I think the whole world watched that, and so many people did tune in and watch it. I was a childhood Tyson fan. I absolutely loved watching him box. That's why I got into boxing when I was a kid. And there was so many other people like that, and everybody had these questions. What's going to happen? What kind of Tyson is going to come out? Is it going to be what we think? Is there something else going on? All that sort of stuff. You being so close to it in that corner, how did you feel in the lead up in the locker room, wrapping the hands? Did you feel anything? Was there anything telling you that it was going to be one way or the other? Because, everybody else was between this digital barrier. I was so curious what it's like to be so close to it.
Yeah, it's funny. Good question. It's because I'm in the dressing room, and the guy from Netflix is there, I guess, and he's looking, and because that's when the girls are fighting, Amanda Serrano, and
Serrano, yeah.
I said, 50 million households are tuned in, and
Crazy.
by the time that fight was finished, it was like 65 million before Mike went out, right? 65 million households, right? And but Mike was fine, but people have to, like, at the end of this second round, I tell Amir, one of the coaches, I say, I think Mike just kind of hit a roadblock, but age caught up to him. It's more than everybody expected. The superstar Mike Tyson, guy's 58 years old.
Yeah.
But here's a story that, he's mentioned it, so I'll mention it again. But he was telling us, and I think it is like going back in June or July before the fights, that he had some issues flying, and that basically he had a bleeding ulcer, and he fainted on the plane, and he lost all kinds of blood, and he was on the hospital for a while, and he lost some weight. So he came from that, and the times I saw him train, he was at high performance, but he's 58 years old.
That's right.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know why people think that. They don't understand that about boxing. It's like I don't care what level of boxing you're at. Age is the killer of all boxing, because like I used to spar TJ right to the end till I was 50 years old, and he's much younger than I am. And I realized that on video, in my mind, I was much quicker. And then on video, I would watch it and going, wow, I'm so slow now. You know what I mean? Like that was the reality of it all. And my wife said, at 50 years old, that's a wrap. No one call no more. He's not sparring anybody anymore. And literally I stopped at 50 sparring with everybody. But at TJ's wedding, he called me out in front of everybody, and he's like, come on, old man, let's just go one more, just spar with me a few more rounds. And we sparred about a half an hour straight. And I said, I was so happy. It was just so, for me, I love it. Right. So, but my wife said, okay, go one last time, you're old now, go ahead. And
I love it.
but it's something I really hope that people understand that boxing, you know, I used to tell this to everybody. My first love was always boxing. I was obsessed with Muhammad Ali. But what happened was along the way is people were convinced that MMA is such a skilled sport, and it is to a certain degree.
It is, yes.
But when they call it the sweet science, there's a reason why it's called the sweet science. And when you take boxers, and I've sparred many guys in the UFC in boxing, and keep in mind, I've never had a professional boxing fight in my life, and none of them ever outboxed me. And there's a reason for that. And that's what people don't understand. Like boxing is a different level. To be great at boxing is so much different than to be great at MMA. And no disrespect to the George St. Pierre's of the world and the Anderson Silvas of the world, but boxing is such a different science than MMA. And the parts I've hated is that they've matched up some really weird fights when Tyson Fury was fighting, Francis Ngannou. And then thank God that got worked out. And I love Francis Ngannou, but I'm glad, Joshua knocked him out because, and not in the fact that I don't like Francis Ngannou. I just like the fact of, please, you have to understand boxing is
different levels.
It's different level. When you hear Jake Paul talking about, going against Canelo and people, the kids next door think that Jake Paul is the best boxer in the world, because they watch him on YouTube and they don't understand that if Canelo fought him, he would kill him. Like it wouldn't even be remotely close. Like he would hurt him on purpose. That's what Canelo would do. And I wish that people would understand that about boxing. That's why boxing, when you see a great boxing fight, the world stops. For MMA, it doesn't stop. For boxing, it stops.
Yeah, it's funny. I've worked against both Jake Paul and Logan Paul. I've been like 4 of their shows, right? And when I walked in when KSI fought Logan Paul at the Staples Center, nobody recognized me. Everybody recognized all these other characters, and they were the social media kids, right?
Yeah.
And Justin Bieber walks right by me,
Yeah,
and,
no clue.
No clue. It was an entirely different world. But I got to give both those guys credit. They've done good for our sport.
They brought eyes.
Better than a lot of promoters have done, by supporting their fighters. Jake Paul's done a great job, and so props to them in that department. All these other promotions should follow suit from these guys.
Don't you think that though, Two Stitch, is that's kind of what did happen to boxing at one point? Everybody got old. Like all the promoters got old. And then Eddie Hearn came along and he kind of was a younger guy and he kind of talked correctly, dressed correctly, and he kind of brought more attention to it. And then the Paul brothers jumped on and they kind of did their thing. And it did bring all these younger people to the game.
More eyes too.
Yeah, it's all marketing. And the Zone, when they had their first fight, they asked me what I thought about it. I said it makes so much sense. Like Jake Paul and Logan Paul and KSI, it made so much sense because they deal it with numbers, and I say once again numbers. But these guys are social media. I didn't even know when I worked with KSI for 6 weeks here in Vegas. I didn't even know who he was when he first came in. I didn't know these guys had like 20 million followers.
It's crazy.
It's insane. But I looked at numbers, and for DAZN to have a pay-per-view made so much sense. Yeah. Even if they got 1% of their followers. Of their followers. But it was crazy. So sure, that's the new generation, new era of boxing and MMA and contact sports.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
The whole UFC thing, obviously, we don't have to get into that, but when that all happened, has there ever been any conversations with you and them again? Has there ever been any talks about maybe having you back or starting to work with you?
Bro, that train passed a long time ago. I don't need them.
That's right.
I'm doing quite well, man. They just finished a documentary on my life like 3 weeks ago. I got to see it for the first time with my family, and Michael B. Jordan and the Creed people are looking at it. And
that's awesome.
They're helping us to.
They should look at it.
Wow. Yeah, they are. No, and Michael's in it. Michael gave me about 30-minute interview, man. He was, he did some great stuff. It's funny because in the second movie, every day it was just like Jake with KSI. Every day I'd wrap their hands, just him and I. And I'm talking to Michael B. Jordan, and I'm saying, Michael, I'm so proud of you and Tessa and Ryan Coogler, and Steve Capel was the second director. He goes, you guys are doing great. And he looks at me and says, Stitch, we're from being actors to writers, producers, and directors. And he looks at me and says, I'm directing Creed 3, and you're with me as long as you want. I said, my man,
That's
so,
awesome.
but yeah, so that's, the kind of people.
You
But I've been blessed.
enjoy the acting? Like you really?
I'm not even an actor, bro, but of course,
Yep, I get it. Yeah, you're playing yourself, right?
who wouldn't want to be in those positions,
Of course.
Absolutely.
And that's it. Listen, I tell people, how many of you guys have know three guys? How many guys have done 3 movies with Rocky?
No
Bro, I
kidding.
have. And how many guys have done 3 movies with Michael B. Jordan? Bro, I have.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
That's
Woody
crazy.
Harrelson, Antonio Banderas, the Ocean's 11 crew.
Crazy.
Yeah. Uh, Boss Rutan and Kevin James and Selma
Yeah.
Hayek, and
That's right.
yeah. So it's been a blessing, and it just So how
It's
can I
awesome that you
complain?
can play yourself. You imagine that? How I?
And it's
yeah,
funny
you're
because
playing yourself.
I'll give a little behind. I almost didn't play myself. So when I get the script, my name is Marcel. I said,
Yeah.
man, I don't know anybody named Marcel. But as you look at Creed 1, when it was time for Rocky to introduce us to Adonis,
Yeah.
Sylvester Stallone says, "Oh, this Stitch, the best cut man in Philadelphia." Bro, my heart started beating. Like, yes, who's gonna tell Rocky? No, cut. No, his name is Marcel. The
No
next day I
kidding.
thanked him. He goes, no, it has to be authentic.
Amen.
So
Amen. He did that.
yeah,
That was
so there was
Wow.
that,
He
and
actually
then
made that happen.
yeah, he made that happen.
Wow.
And then in the scenes when Rocky throws up, remember when he gets cancer?
Yeah.
And they're doing the pad work. Well, we had just left, and that wasn't in the script, but it's snowing in Philadelphia, so the gym's on the second floor, and on the stairs down, we're waiting there behind the scenes, and all of a sudden I hear Stitch, and I said, nah, maybe it's part of the movie, and it wasn't, But
Yeah.
the next day I'm wrapping Michael's hands. I said, Michael, I said, I don't go kissing nobody's butt, but let me tell you about that scene.
Yeah.
That scene is extremely important because you know that my job is to take care of you. And in the movie I had just left. So as Rocky got sick, your first instinct was to call for me, Stitch. So yeah.
That's
So
interesting.
moments like that, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Was it ever like because I know you came from a very humble place, that's for sure, and you have a book called I believe from the field to the garden.
And that's the name of the documentary.
Awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, I can't wait for it to come out.
Stitch, when he told me that today, I thought it was a cookbook.
Yeah.
I was like, what the hell? Stitch came up with a cookbook?
Yeah.
And he goes,
No,
no,
for the
he goes, it
film
ain't a cookbook, Mark. And I was like, wow, does it ever sound like one?
Well,
Yeah.
I gotta ask you though, when you got approached, and I'm not sure what the first role was or the first movie, but talk about Creed and working with those guys. When you got approached to do that, and obviously it's because of who you became within the industry of combat sports, and that's just because of your passion and hard work. There's nothing else that created that. But for you to have gone through that and created this persona in a sense, that's important enough for people to feel like if we want to make this authentic, we want to make it with Stitch. Stitch has to be the guy. When that happened, coming from where you came from, how was that experience? That had to be kind of surreal. And is it sort of one of those times when you kind of have to pinch yourself and think like, holy shit, like how did I get to this point? Because now you're the one that makes it authentic. And that's got to feel pretty good coming from where you came from.
Yeah, you just gave me chills, bro. Yeah. And but now you're right, for those that don't know. Yeah, for those that don't know, I'm glad you brought that up. Is I grew up as a farm worker in the Central Valley of California.
Yeah.
I was born and raised in a migrant camp, bro, with my address is CPC number 12, California Packing Company.
Amazing.
So where I'm at there, yeah, of course it blows my mind, and but like I was telling these kids that are working outside, I said, look, if I could do it, anybody could do it. It's just being at the right place, doing the right things, and and I'll tell you guys, both you guys, that line that you guys were scared to cross to be on there. If you didn't cross it, we wouldn't be talking right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why I tell these guys, that line we're all scared to cross. If you don't cross it, man, you'll never get there.
Absolutely.
And we've all been there. But for me, so when I saw the last Creed 3, I went back to my hometown. It's like 1,500 people, and I bought 50 tickets. And the guys that I grew up with in the migrant camp, and my friends that I grew up with from kids all the way up, they were my guests at the premiere of Creed. So so I'm going to do the same thing with the documentary. Once we get it signed off, then I'll go back home and I'll present it to my friends and family. But that's my inspiration for me, TJ. I remember one time I was still with the UFC. I went back home and we're in the backyard drinking beers, as we do, right?
Yeah.
And one of my friends said, Jacob, he goes, you really inspire us. And I said, wow, thanks. But as I'm driving back to LA, it's like 5 hours away. So UFC at the Staples Center. I'm thinking about that comment. I said, you really inspire us, but
Yeah.
as me inspiring them inspires me.
Yeah.
So that gives me the motivation to help other people and to, when I moved to Vegas, I've been here 30 years. I said, look, I'm taking a bus, man. If you want to get on the bus, get on because I'm going with or without you,
That's
Yeah.
right. That's
but
right.
but getting back to the UFC, now you know what I've been blessed and people have always asked me if I run into Dana and
Yeah.
this and that and I said nah, but if I do, I shake his hand and say,
Yeah. Who
look, man,
cares? Yeah.
yeah,
Business is
thanks for
business,
letting me
yeah,
go
sure.
because it's the best thing ever happened to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I say, people still stop me all over the world
Yeah.
They have to.
and associate me with the UFC. So when you see the documentary, there's a nice piece of when I left the UFC.
Good.
Oh, perfect.
Good. I'm
Yeah,
excited to see it.
Perfect.
I'm very excited to see it.
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty badass, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When is that documentary going to come out? Do you know?
Well, they just finished it up, like I say, 3 weeks ago, and now
Yeah.
they're doing a little bit of the sound effects and
Yeah.
just polishing it up. But now they're looking whether Michael and them should suggest whether we do film festivals.
Oh, yeah.
And
Ooh, I like that.
so because they're talking about Toronto,
Yeah.
they're talking
Yeah,
about
yeah.
I had one guy that offered to sponsor us at the Cannes Film Festival, all
Wow.
expenses
That'd be
paid.
amazing.
Wow.
He just wanted associate producer credits.
Sure.
These guys that have money, but
Yeah.
the entry was too late for us because we were still filming.
Yeah.
But to have that kind of support is pretty awesome. But it's a nice film. It's where if I could do it, anybody could do it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well,
Yeah.
there's to be able to come from those beginnings and then also to go through never chasing fame because nobody gets into the Cutman business chasing fame. Obviously,
No.
that's the fucking opposite of what you're doing it for.
Yeah.
To show people that if you use your passion as a drive and you really stick to it and you push and like you say you cross that line, you never really know the possibilities because life is an interesting thing. But it's incredible where you've gotten to. That's for sure.
It blows my mind every day, bro. I'm just like, why me? But as I look at life, there's somebody had to do it.
You know,
I just happen to be that guy.
our third man here, our tech guy, Skip, is asking me. He's like bugging me to ask you a question. He's
Yeah,
like,
Skip.
and I'm trying to wave him off, and I'm keep looking at him. He's like, ask him.
Yeah,
He
come on,
wants
man.
to know if you weren't a cut man, what you would have done with your life? Like if you specifically weren't the cut man or trainer, what would have you done besides that?
Bro, I got a high school diploma. I'd be a dumb fuck.
Skip. There you go. Okay, that's
Yeah.
that's your answer. Take that one.
No, you know what? No, that's a good question. Skip. Okay, so
there has to be something you thought about one time in your life where you went, I would have probably done that.
baseball was always my dream.
Oh man,
TJ too.
Yeah, I played baseball. I was third baseman, and
Nice.
and grew up in a small town. So every Sunday we had pickup games, and
Yeah.
I played 4 years as a high school varsity ball and walked down to Merced College.
Wow.
And Merced College was like 9 miles away from my town, but I never had a car, so I would go to school with friends, and they would leave after school, and I'd stay in practice, and I'd have to hitchhike home, and I was naive. I didn't know about grants. I didn't know about scholarships, so I joined the Air Force, and in 1972, and I always said if I went to the Orient, I would want to study the martial arts. That was during the Bruce Lee era.
Yeah,
And,
of course.
And 1974, they stationed me in a place called Thailand. Bro, I didn't even know what Thailand was.
Damn.
And I saw my first Muay Thai fight, and from there on the base they had Taekwondo for it's Korean sport, and then they left, and the Thais transitioned us. So I had all those and both those sports under my belt in that 1 year. I ate, slept, and I'm having lunch with the monks, and I'm doing all this in the jungles of Thailand.
Wow.
And, I did the whole kung fu shit,
Yeah.
And then I opened my own school of kickboxing, and that's why Dennis Alexio, and that was the days of Rick Rufus, Jean-Yves Theriault, and Mark Longo, and I had my school of kickboxing during that era, and that's how I learned to be a cut man. But
you had a promotion too, an IKF promotion, didn't you?
yeah, ASK. ASK was the name of my school, American School of Kickboxing, and but I trained Javier Mendez that now works with Habib and
of
all
course,
these guys,
of
and
course.
I worked Francis Farley, and I was. That was
Why
my
did
game.
that? What happened to that? Like the K1 era, but that's always been a great sport to watch.
Yeah, yeah. It was
Kickboxing was like just K1 was awesome because the knockout ratio was about 85%, of the time someone's going to get knocked out. And it was just a great sport to watch.
yeah, but it never kicked in big in the United
It
States.
did not. No.
ISKA, that was Karen Turner and all that. The Coors, that was kickboxing, 10 kicks or above the waist.
That's
No
right.
leg
Yeah,
kicks.
yeah, yeah.
And that was that kicked on, but never kicked big in the United States.
No, it didn't.
No, no. Still struggles to get much viewership. I mean, compared to the other sports, the mixed martial arts and boxing, kickboxing for some reason is just not translated.
Right.
But
what's your next biggest fight, Stitch?
I have May 2nd I'll be with Devin Haney in New York, and then two days later I'll be here with Top Rank on the Inouye card, and then let's see, that's the 10th I'll be in San Diego for Top Rank, and then the 31st I'll be here in Vegas with Caleb Plant.
Okay,
and
yeah.
so on and so
Wow.
on and so on.
Busy.
So I've been blessed, bro.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's
I'm
awesome.
telling you, and to this day, Mark and TJ, I've never asked for one job, bro. I just can't kiss nobody's butt. It's just not my nature.
Yeah.
And just I've been, by the grace of God, it's
Sure.
and performance. It's
Yeah.
but by the grace of God, I've been given these opportunities, and it's been a blessing in disguise.
Don't you think it's the way you've always carried yourself? I've always noticed that. I've always
Yeah.
I've always paid attention to people's posture, and I've always paid attention to how people conduct themselves. And every time I saw you, you always conducted yourself with so much class and dignity. So when I saw that, there was those people that I always noticed that did that, and I was always attracted to watching those people because, as you know, in this day and age, it becomes less and less now, right? People with correct manners and how they conduct themselves, and they're worried about that. It always seemed like you were worried about how, not saying you're worried about other people. It was like an inner thing with you about how you conducted yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point, and by nature, my parents we've always given back, because we all grew up poor, so we had to give back and give back. So that's always been my nature. But what really sealed it is, God, I mean, I've been here 30 years in Vegas. Dennis Alexio fought here, so it was over 30 something years ago. He fought here in Vegas, and Vitaly Klitschko fought.
Yeah.
Big Brad Hefton and all these guys. So they fought here, and then after the fights, we're talking to Randall Cunningham. Now, Randall Cunningham was the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, but but he played football at UNLV here, and so me and my three brothers, and I'm still Jacob, bro. I'm not even Stitch. I'm nobody.
You're not there yet.
We're talking to Randall Cunningham, and this guy comes up and says, "Hey, Randall, come here, man. Let me introduce you to these guys." He says, "Hold on." He goes, "Let me finish talking to these guys." I never felt so important in my whole life, man. For him to have done that, he's a pastor here.
That's right.
In Las Vegas, and I've done this story hundreds of times. I have never met him once. And I don't want to. I want to meet him organically, because my brother says, "Well, go to his church and tell him." I said, "Nah, I'm going to run into him one of these days and let him know that you just reinforced that this is how you want to treat people, because I felt so important." And those little moments like that make a big difference.
Do you run into Ray Sefo in Vegas ever?
Every once in a while, sure, of course. I'll go to.
He's been on our show. He's been on our show, and he was just a fabulous guest as well.
And I'll do what I call gym. I don't do shit. I work on weekends, right?
Yeah.
So I'll do a gym run. I'll go to the Mayweather's gym and Top Rank and Randy Couture, just kind of barbershop talk, right? So I'll see Ray every once in a while. But I remember when Ray had the World Series of Fighting?
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, he was the first show at the Atlanta.
Yeah.
Well, he had called me. I'll give you guys a little behind the scenes stuff.
Sure.
He had called me and asked if I could bring in Cutman like we did in the UFC.
Sure.
So I'm thinking, yes, of course, man. Well, we did. And next thing I know, me and Don House, the two Cutmen, weren't getting the next 5 fights. And and I had every fight from day one to that point. And I sit down with the attorney. I say, "Hey, man, what's up?" I said, "Well, you worked the WSOF fight and you gave these guys credibility." I said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, what?" I said, "I didn't do it I did it for the sake of the fighters."
Sure.
Right? And at that point, that's when things started kind of, and then the attorney tries to give me a hug as I leave.
Yeah, no hugging.
Yeah.
No, bro.
We ain't hugging, no.
I ain't that kind of guy, man.
No.
But yeah, but Ray's a lovely guy, man.
He is. I really think he's one of the most loved guys in MMA. The way it should be, in my opinion. And he was on our show before, and he was just an awesome guest. And literally, like we're always getting great guests on our show, but it was funny how like he knew the lay of the law of the land, but purposely he knew what was going on about certain things, but he only spoke about what he can control.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I liked.
Yeah, it's the same with me. You know, I don't
Yes,
get involved
correct.
with I don't get involved with people's problems. I got my own. You know,
That's
but
right.
that's why I just keep that neutral. I don't care as long as you treat me well.
That's
That's
right.
how I'm going to respond to you.
That's right.
You know, and if somebody has a beef with you, that's between you guys.
That's right.
You know,
For sure.
I got a lot of problems. Yours ain't one of them. You know?
That should always be the case.
Yes.
But Stitch, we would both love to sit and talk forever. We probably could, and it's
Easy.
been a true pleasure. Honestly, it really has, and a little surreal for me because I've watched you so much, and I have been a big fan. In fact, I will say, you are sort of responsible for my obsession with watches. You used to have those big watches on your wrist when you would do fights, and so I digress a bit, but now I have a bit of an obsession. It's spared from that, so thank you. And also, you've cost me a lot of money, but that's okay. My wife might not be as happy about it, but either way. But we do have to go. We only have so much time, but I'll leave it with you for anything else. If there's a message you want to leave for the people that are listening, what would that be? I'll leave it with you.
No, that's it, man. I want to thank you guys for having me on. And you're right, it's what you call barbershop talk. And man, we do this forever. Nobody has the stories I have. Nobody's worked as many great fighters as me. Nobody. And you don't think it blows my mind? Shit, it blows my mind every day.
Yeah.
It's just crazy how things are happening. But I'm always that little Chicano that grew up as a farm worker that I never forget where I come from. And I know you guys are the same, man. But thanks for having me on. And next time we're in Alberta, man, we'll hook up.
Oh, next time we're in Vegas.
Vegas, come on down, man.
That's it, man.
I'll
Thanks
wrap
so
your
much,
hands like a
Stitch.
fighter. Hey, I'll wrap your hands like Jason.
Yeah, and listen, and I'll have the sense to cut it off correctly and keep it.
All right.
So-
All right, my man. God bless, huh?
Awesome.
Take
Thank
care,
you,
Stitch.
sir. I really
Thank you so
All right,
much.
God bless.
All right, Stitch Duran. You know what, man?
I don't know about you, bro, but that was different.
Happier.
Yeah. It's a happier.
After talking to that guy.
Yeah.
When you said we were having Stitch on, I got excited, and I honestly, I'm a huge fan, and it's so funny because how am I a fan of a Cutman?
It's true. The way you said it though, I was like, you're right. Do you imagine being so great at something? Do you understand what happened?
Yeah.
He's so great at something that we have to pay attention to him because he's so great. And when I used to see him at all the events, literally he's taping Jason McDonald's hand one day, and I said, Jason, we got to get Stitch Duran to tape your hands. And he's like, yeah, Mark, get Stitch. So I got Stitch, and I watched him tape the hands, and the way how methodical he was about taping the hands, it was perfect, like absolutely perfect. And I watched what he did differently with MMA because he didn't tape. He was careful how he taped around the hand, the palm, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to grapple.
Yeah.
So he actually altered his way of taping for boxing for MMA to do that. So literally, you understand, and then he becomes an actor. He becomes now he's become a producer. Now he's got a documentary.
In general,
Yeah.
It's just, and what's so inspiring about him, and again, I could have talked to him for 4 or 5 hours.
Easy. Easy.
There's so many things that I still want to ask him, but we only have so much time.
There'll be a part two. There'll be a part 2 to Stitch one day.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
It has to be because there's just so many more things we get into.
Yeah.
But just from the fact that he came from a place where most people would just say, what am I supposed to do? I have no future. I have no support, whatever the case. And carried himself in a way that was so opposite to where he came from and moved forward always with passion and always with drive. And just because he did that and he did what he did so well and he was so respected that he's become Stitch. These
That's right.
movies. And again, like they want to make something authentic and they want to make something real. So they call Stitch, the Rock.
Listen, bro, you got Madonna, you got Elvis, and you got Stitch. Like it's just by one name. When you're known by one name, that's when you've made it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And literally, what I'm talking about is there's a guy that the way he carries himself. Mm-hmm. When the UFC, he made comment about the Reebok deal back in the day. And he made
worthy comment as well.
Yes, and he made a comment. Now listen, don't forget, we're talking about the UFC that says you can talk any way you want, you can say whatever you want until you say something that doesn't agree with what they agree with, and then all of a sudden you're gone. Yeah. The greatest cutman in the history of combat sports was let go by the UFC because he spoke up for the fighters. I don't want anybody to ever forget that or to ever think don't lose track of history, people. He was sticking up for the fighters because he knew that a lot of fighters, the Brendan Schaubs of the world, the Jason McDonalds of the world, all the other guys lost a ton of money.
Everybody,
Everybody lost.
every guy that had
Patrick Cote,
Yeah.
Ed Herman, Lehman, all those guys lost money, and literally he spoke up, and he wasn't derogatory when he
No, not
spoke
at all.
up. He just said his opinion. They basically said we don't need him around anymore, And I thought, wow, the company that always brags about how we're going to let everybody talk the way they want to talk, not so much.
Well, and again, like you said, best thing that could ever happen to him. So it's not like anybody's,
He's with Top Rank now.
He doesn't care. He's with Top Rank. He's doing, but it's just again, super inspiring. I love hearing stories like that. I can't wait for the documentary to come out because I relate very much to those kinds of stories, as you know.
Yes.
And I just feel like it's always incredible for people to see, and especially people that might be in the same similar situation, for people to see somebody that just through hard work, passion, dedication, and having a value in himself created this success. And
You're
this
correct, TJ.
career,
TJ, between the last few guests like Boss Rutan and after listening to Stitch right now, and people watching at home have to realize, like, these are people that came from different backgrounds that have found some way to convince their mind to go forward and not to stop.
Self-worth, man.
It really is.
Incredible example of self-worth, and saying where I am now is something that I try my very best to do as well for myself, and I think everybody should. But in those examples of people that come from a place like where he did, I say I'm worth more than that, or I'm going to carry myself with the worth that I have in myself.
Yeah.
And that's what got him to where he is. And again, I can't imagine how surreal that must have been, getting a phone call from Rocky, and
Can you imagine Rocky, bro? Rocky.
Like, come on.
Rocky.
Incredible. All three Creed movies.
all of them.
Just incredible. Yeah. I mean, anyways, we could have gone on for hours.
I can't wait till the documentary actually comes out, because I have a strange suspicion that you and I probably could get tickets to the opening of the.
And I would be there. I would be there, man, in a heartbeat.
I'm pretty sure
to watch it.
I'm pretty sure we could get tickets to. Stitch would arrange that for us to get tickets.
Listen, I'll pay for them, man. I'm up to.
For the Busted Lip podcast, we'll make our way out there to watch it. But did you hear what he said though? What the Creed openings, that he brought people from the camp that he was at.
Yeah. He went back to that city and got 50 tickets. But you know what? Because it means something, like it does mean something to achieve at a high level.
Yeah.
You don't forget where you came from. And then what was interesting was that somebody telling him that he inspired them.
Yeah.
That became his inspiration, inspiring those people.
That became his inspiration.
Yes.
Yeah.
It became his inspiration, because when you realize that you can give people, because there's something about making it out of a bad situation when you're a kid. When you get out of that situation and you become something that maybe you looked up to when you were a child, or something you imagined, this reality, and then you create that reality. There is this piece of you that wants to help others create that same reality. Yeah. And it's a very palpable thing, but not everybody's able to recognize it, and not everybody goes back and does it. And for him to be doing it, again, great guy, super fun to talk to. We'll have to run it back, because that's
for sure. It's like you're eating your salad, then you kind of get to the main course. You're like, oh, I want the dessert now, and I want a coffee after. It's like that's what it felt like when we were watching when I was in the show and watching it, and that's how I felt.
Yeah, super cool. That was awesome.
We want to thank our great sponsors at Crystal Glass, your clear choice for all your glass needs. Call 310 Glass or go to crystalglass.ca today. Over 75 years in the glass industry. We want to thank them for their incredible sponsorship. And of course, every Thursday, everybody, Throwdown Thursdays with myself and TJ Harstein. And I think we're going to do something a little bit tricky this week. So usually we don't have a guest. We usually don't have a guest on a Thursday, but we might have to bring someone in. There's some controversy going on back and forth, and TJ's want the heart of this controversy, and I think he's got it. He's kind of doing one of these, like he's got it up to here with it, so he wants to deal with it. And we've seeked out the one person that can bring some light to this controversy. So on Thursday, Throwdown Thursday, I believe we will be talking about that issue.
Awesome. And I cannot wait. We won't say anything until we get there, but I'm telling you guys, it's going to be, no matter what happens, it's going to be exciting, and I can't wait. I love Throwdown Thursdays. But that's it for today.
And don't forget, guys, too, also, TJ, follow us on all our social media.
I'm
Busted
about
Lip
to-
Podcast.
Yeah, I'm about to get into it. We got it.
Please.
So at Busted Lip Podcast on all social media. You can also follow my counterpart, Mark Pavlich, at Mark Pavlich on all social media platforms, and myself, yours truly, at TJ Harstein on all social media platforms. Go and give us a follow, subscribe to YouTube, follow us on Spotify. We'll see you every Monday and Thursday. Thank you very much, everybody. Cheers.
I done tussle with a whale